Hey everyone, welcome back. It's
Hi.
Green Thread. I'm Allie,
And I'm Alexis.
and we're here to pull on that climate thread to bring, climate news to you. Today we're going to be talking about how nature's palette is important for environmental, I guess, connection. Also, just to have communication between species. There's a fun fact that I really want to share with you, though. Did you know that the vibrant colors in birds' feathers aren't from pigments? They're actually like structural in the feathers.
Really, that's so interesting because I'm going to talk about this a lot later in the
Yeah.
episode, but I learned that there's two different ways that light can be absorbed basically in nature, and one of them is absorption and one of them is from the structure. It's like a nanostructure of stuff, a lot of science stuff that I was like,
Yeah.
okay.
I know. When I had my ornithology class, we were like going over the three different ways that like the bird's feather can change color or like have pigment.
Uh-huh.
Mostly from carotenoids, which is for like if they have a different diet. That's why parrots have a different look than penguins or vice versa. Also from melanin, and then porphyrins. So there's like a bunch of different ways that birds can have different color feathers. But I was thinking it's so cool that it goes all the way into the structure of the feather of why they're different colors.
Yeah.
Crazy. So if that doesn't show you that color plays a huge part in nature, then I don't know what would.
Right. Color is very important in nature. That brings us to our topic of today, color in nature. So color plays a really crucial role with camouflaging, with survival. Communication is honestly the biggest umbrella term I think you could use for it because it's used for mating, survival, like I said, and also for photosynthesis in plants and chlorophyll. Color is very, very important in that aspect. I found a TED Talk and it was called "What is the Rarest Color in Nature?" And I clicked on it. Was like a 5-minute TED Talk. Please take the time to do it. I'll link it in this episode. But I saw it. I was like, oh, I don't know. So I'm going to the video. I'm like trying to guess before it actually gets to that point. I'm like, what's the rarest color? Is it red? Is it yellow? Is it blue? Is it purple? I had no idea. As the video went on, I just kept guessing and I kept being wrong because it's a lot more complicated than I thought it was. So what drives color in nature is physics and evolution drive the rarity of colors in nature. That was a note that I took from the video. So color has been super important in survival, like I said. So that kind of is the evolution part, survival of the fittest. If you are a colorful parrot in the Arctic tundra, you're not really going to have any good chances. So that's why a lot of animals that live in the Arctic tundra or just live in a snowy environment are white, things like that. And how we had mentioned earlier with our fun fact, which if you didn't hear our fun fact, please go watch our video so you can hear our fun little fun fact. And colors in nature can be absorption based. A lot of fruits and flowers are absorption based. And higher energy wavelengths are more easily observed than lower energy ones. So I found this interesting. This is why throughout the video, I was like, which one is the lowest? Which one's the highest?
Yeah.
What's the rarest? And as the video goes on and on, there's another way that color can be shown in nature, which is it can be scattered and amplified through the structures, like we had said in the feathers. And the video said that violet is actually the rarest color in nature. That's the big conclusion, the big aha is violet, because it is higher than blue. It's a higher energy than blue, and there's not many structures that can structurally scatter it. It's not created to scatter something, especially that high wavelength. It doesn't. There's just not that many that were made that way. So I found that really, really interesting. But yeah, that was a really interesting TED Talk about it. So yeah, definitely go watch that.
Yeah, I definitely have to look into that. I think when you're like thinking of the color spectrum that you do learn in your science classes, like you think of like, ultraviolet and all the different things going from purple all the way to red, and you're like, well, how do plants, animals, nature like have those same colors or have the same reflection as our eyes? Is it them? And so thinking of like there being a rare color is not only like it being too high of a wave for our eye to see it, but also it's hard for nature to like construct it. Huh. Interesting. I mean, whenever I think of colors and what their meanings are, I'm always thinking like my mind goes straight to warnings.
Yeah.
And just like especially with ecological indicators, that being the main one that I think of, because especially with like the ocean, red tides, and even just algal blooms in general.
Yeah.
Those are the first things I think of. And I wonder if like the pigment from like the chlorophyll in the plants, or I think the red tides were from the same algal bloom. It says that there's like a microbe. I found out that like fungi develop like a certain pigmentation as a response to pollution. So that's what causes the red tides. So I wonder if they like have a specific color that they have a hard time producing, or if they can even produce more than one color.
Right. And that gets my brain thinking. I'm about to go real off track here a little bit. But in biology last year, I remember learning about things like dinoflagellates and a lot of microorganisms that cause bioluminescence as well. And I just wonder if that has anything to do with, what I had just said from that TED Talk, or just in general, how does bioluminescence fit with color in nature,
That's a really interesting question. We'll have to figure that out. If we end up finding it, though, we can link it to the video.
Yeah,
y'all,
if
you aren't seeing us, then we can link it in the description of the episode. Going off of like the indicators, I also know it's important to know like the color of, say, like we were talking about gardening a couple episodes back. So the soil, because that can also be a good indicator, not for like ecological purposes, but for you. So we always know like the darkest soil means the healthiest soil, vice versa. The lightest soil is probably not the most healthiest. There's also foliage too, so it helps you knowing what seasons are changing.
Yes.
Which I know with the warming temperatures, our seasons are kind of being a little off put. So we'll see like the leaves are changing within like a very short amount of time, and honestly at a later time, which is a little sad to think about, but it's all chemical process. So because of the air temperatures rising, it off-puts those chemical signals that the tree's putting out to the branches and to the leaves. But all of these can be good indicators for you, and not necessarily for like nature to nature, because I don't know if it really matters to a squirrel whether or not the the leaves are red or green, but it's good for you to know like what is going on, or how that'll impact you, especially because like the different autumn patterns can really reduce, like we were talking about with you saying that like a certain bird might not be able to live in the tundra because of color. Same thing with this, like if the foliage is changing at a faster and more infrequent rate, then the animals that are relying on that foliage color for their like external camouflage might not survive, because we can't like the foxes that are white in the winter and brown in the like other seasons, they might not be able to survive through the winter months if they're still brown, but the foliage changed really quick. And that could be said for so many different animals, and that's kind of another reason why we like to touch base on like endangered species and how their environment can impact like their population sizes, because if they're being vulnerable or exposed, then what it was to say that they're not going to survive much longer because of just all these different steps in the climate change realm.
Right. I think it'll be really interesting to see how things play out in the next few years regarding what different environments look like, what local ecosystems are going to look like because of things like that. And this is kind of our Debbie Downer of the episode. Sorry, we got to talk about it. Climate change has really affected color in nature, and it's super interesting. I found an article. I did my research a lot this time.
Okay.
Proud of myself. I found this article, and it was saying that the way that color is changing is through delaying fall foliage. It is greening oceans and making colder areas more vegetated, which I thought was really interesting too. So what's happening is it's getting so warm with global warming and just with climate change in general that the ecosystems and biomes that are at the equator or in the warmest parts of the world, they're slowly creeping to the opposite sides of the world. So I even saw an article, I think I've mentioned it in a previous episode, about alligators, their environment, like their conditions are moving up. So they're slowly creeping up out of Florida, out of the Gulf kind of part of the United States and out of the southern part of the United States. And that's just going to keep happening. The warmer that it gets, the more that these environments are going to get pushed upward. Our temperate forests are going to push upward, and subtropical is going to move up, which is really concerning because these biomes and these ecosystems are very, very... The environment is very sensitive.
Exactly.
It has to work under certain conditions, and when those conditions change, one thing can change everything just like that. Whether it's, a little bit warmer, a little bit windier, a little bit more vegetated, that could change everything. And in that article that I had mentioned, it specifically talked a lot about the greening oceans. So greening oceans is that has been proven to be caused by climate change. Not the presence of phytoplankton and chlorophyll. These were researchers from MIT who did these simulations and did this research on this article. They ran simulations of what the oceans would look like with and without human-produced greenhouse gases, and the simulation matched the satellite imagery almost exactly of what it would look like with human-caused greenhouse gases, which I thought was really sad. But the fact that we have this technology is amazing as well. And just to see, I hope that we can use this, and as we further technology, that we can almost prevent things like this, because if we can model it, then maybe we can run some predictions and say, okay, what happens if we add this much, this over X amount of years, then what's going to happen? And we can come up with a little bit better solutions, a little bit better practices to kind of stop it before it gets here.
No, actually. And that goes for like anything. When we talk about weather, and all these different other like factors that play into that. And we are able to predict that. So I'm sure, honestly, in the next like maybe even 10 years, we'll have something.
I hope so.
Probably more, hopefully like in 5, because I know it's already getting to that point. But with all that to say, there are things you can do to influence the color nature and to protect it. A lot of the things we've already talked about in our episodes, but just going back over them to have a little like positive note would be like reducing the amount of pollution that you produce. It always starts with a little change, as we always say. Supporting clean energy, supporting sustainability, which we'll talk about in a couple episodes from now. Also minimize your footprint. We talked about our footprints a couple episodes back. And then just advocate, doing what we do, learning facts about why color is important and what's influencing it, and in which way can we influence it, and telling your friend, your family, even your foe. I don't know. Like,
tell everyone you know. If they're your arch nemesis, please tell them. Like if you're in a screaming match, just in the middle of it, if you want to like make things a little bit less tense, listen to Green Thread. Just like go off on them. Yeah,
you can blame us for like causing more issues with your family if that helps you just getting information out.
Yeah,
that's fine with me. You have my permission.
You have my blessing to do that. Please.
No, actually, but this is like crazy to think how color is everywhere and what it means, because every single bit of like color patterns, whether it be like say a poisonous frog or a snake, like all of that's important for you to know when you're out in the wilderness, or just for them to other species for communication. Even talking about pollinators, like UV patterns and flowers are a good attraction for specific pollinators they need to help reproduce. So many different ways that color is important, and how we, like you were talking about with the oceans, like we can individually impact those colors and how we can ultimately affect our environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think that was a great input.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. Please follow us on our socials. We have YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you want to see our lovely faces, TikTok, Instagram. We've got all of it. So, thanks for joining us, and keep pulling on that green thread.